Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo. Today we're going to be starting the huge savanna that we've been talking about for a while now, and the first habitat that's going to go in is a mixed habitat for white rhino and springbok. It's going to be even bigger than Hippo Falls, and that's just this one part of it, and we're going to do a little bit of work on the other part of the savanna as well. So let's get building. The first thing we need to do is get our guests down from the forest to the savanna, and I want a really gentle slope to do that so that when they're up in the forest the guests can see down into the savanna and then make their way down there, and as they're going down they're going to be seeing rhinos, giraffe, zebra, all sorts of animals. So we'll use this piece of concrete as a guide, sort out the terrain, and then get some paths in so that our guests will be able to come down here. I've smoothed out the terrain so that we can get the paths in here without any issues, and then when we get down to the bottom we're going to raise this last path because the whole path through the savanna is going to be raised, and then we'll just join this on nicely to the path that we've got coming down the hill. There we go. The path itself is going to go right the way through the middle of the habitat. So the savanna is actually going to be two habitats, the one that we're building this week and one that we will build next week. But with a path running right through the middle of them, it will feel like it's one habitat that the guests are in the middle of. This is the main viewing gallery for both habitats here. And then we're going to put in the groundwork for a feeding platform for giraffe. Put it on the wrong side here. We'll switch that over in a second because what I want is giraffes on the left as you look at it here, because they're going to be more visible from up in the forest, and the rhinos will be on the right. We also want multiple paths through and into this section, so joining this up to one of the hippo viewing galleries, and then we're going to have another path going off the main path into the savanna here, taking guests around the side and joining it up to the hippo, so that we've got loads of different ways that guests can get through here and onto the habitats that are going to come after this, like the elephants and lions, etc. This is the knoll barriers here. That's one of the habitats laid out. They're both going to be similar in terms of shape and size. And then we're going to start working on the terrain for today's rhino habitat. So we'll drop the terrain down here just to make sure that there's enough space up to the paths and the viewing gallery where the guests are going to be. Don't want anyone being within sort of horn distance of the rhinos. And then we'll use the flatten to terrain tool to get a nice gradual sort of slope between them here in a more natural shape. We don't want any straight lines in this habitat. We'll go straight in with an enrichment item here to make sure it's in a good place to view from the viewing gallery, and then we'll start working on the walls. So we're going to use the mud walls that we created for the hippos again here, just make a few adjustments. This ridge that you see behind the walls is where the African restaurant is going to go. We're going to have a restaurant that has a beautiful view over the savanna. I think that'll be really cool. That's something I think I'm going to sort of build that here and there in the background, and we'll come and check on how it's going every now and again rather than devoting an entire episode to it, just because we've already done one restaurant episode and I've got another one planned later on in the series for something pretty over the top, so I don't really want three of them. We're going to use the roughen terrain tool here just to get some more interest into this terrain, and then we'll move on to some fences. So we're going to use the electric fence for this habitat. I don't think I've ever used the in-game electric fence before. The reason for it is that most of the barriers are going to be rocks and things like that. There'll be a few places where I want you to be able to see into the other parts of our African area here, the elephants, etc. So some parts are going to have a more normal fence that you can see through. So we're going to use a mixture of the electric fence, some big fake tree trunks to act as support for the fences, some bollards in front of the fences because electric fences should only ever be used as a secondary barrier really, and then we're going to put some big steel bars in as well just to make absolutely 100% certain it is hippo proof. Now we'll move on to the terrain painting, and we're going to be doing a lot of work with dirt and sand here. So something that's really hard to get in a zoo setting rather than a safari park setting, especially if you're in Southern California, is grass, or lots of grass anyway, into a habitat for rhinos and animals like that, because they are grazers. So even a big habitat like this, there's only a small area where grass can grow, and these guys are going to eat it all day long no matter what you feed them. So it's very difficult to have a beautiful grassy sort of savanna style habitat. So what we're going to be doing is using mostly dirt and sand, and then just having little bits of grass here and there in places where it might be a bit less accessible, or places where it's still hanging on for dear life. And we'll use some drier bushes and then some specimen trees that are protected a bit later on to bring the habitat to life. What we're doing here is making a rocky outcrop. I want to use the faux rocks for this so we get a nice kind of zooey look where it's sort of half natural looking and half fake looking. And this is going to run along the back of the habitat and allow us to grow a load of African trees behind it, where they're completely protected from the rhinos' attempts to destroy them. Means we can get a really nice border to the habitat and loads of greenery and classic African trees that are visible when you look at the habitat without being in any danger of getting knocked down by the rhinos. So we'll use a load of different fake rocks here until I get a shape that I like, i.e. this one, and then we're going to copy them along and then start adjusting the heights so that we can get a nice variation in the heights and a nice natural look, a bit like we did with Gorilla Mountain, although this is a lot more three-dimensional because it needs to be more solid. It's not just a facade like it was in Gorilla Mountain. So we'll get this across about half of the habitat to create areas of interest and a creep for the Springbok as well. If you don't know what a creep is, more on that later. They are really cool. And then we're going to blend it in with the mud walls as well. I was originally going to just put this right at the bottom of the walls to make them a bit more solid looking, but I realized it looked really nice when you blend them together. The lighter color of these faux rocks and then the darker colors of the fake tree trunks, the stalactites, look really nice together. And I love how this looks. I'm going to be doing this technique a lot more in the future, I think. One of those happy accidents. Onto the rhino house. So we're going to hide this from the guests using some clever rock placement throughout the habitat, so we don't need to spend too long on it. And in fact, we're basically just copying the hippo house. The interior will be different, of course, but in terms of the exterior, I like the hippo house. It looks pretty subtle and it looks quite nice from above. So we're just going to use that again and then get a different entrance in here. And you can see we've covered most of it up with rocks, and then one of the rocky outcrops that we created a second ago is going to screen the view of the doors from the guest viewing as well, so it'll be completely invisible to guests. We're just going to quickly reconfigure the habitat here, and then we can put in the African trees that I spoke about, looking nice. Onto the specimen tree. So rhinos, like I say, will do quite a lot of damage to any trees you have in their habitat. So we're going to surround them with an edited version of those rocky outcrops, and then we can safely have a few really nice African trees in the habitat to give a pop of color and add some interest to the big old habitat that we've got here. Let's get some more plants in as well. I want to go with some slightly drier looking plants like these hawthorns. Maybe the rhinos wouldn't eat these, who knows. We'll get some shrubs around here and then use some of the longer ones and sink them down into the ground to get a nice grassy effect around this outcrop. Want as many different shades of green as we can here. We've got 3 really different shades of green if we include that palm there, which looks really nice. And we're going to do a couple more of these in the habitat as well, really bring it to life. So once this one is done, we're going to go to the back of the habitat and put in an Mpingo tree, which is one of my favorite trees in the game. They're really nice. We'll do another one later. And then we're going to move on to a custom sunshade for the rhinos. They're used to the heat, but they also like some shade. We don't have any shades big enough for a rhino in the game, so we're going to make one using the canoe sail from the Oceania pack. We're going to copy and rotate this on its axis until we've got a shape of a sunshade. All the fabric and wood looks really cool there. We need to do a few adjustments to get it perfect. There we go. And then we're going to take each individual piece and rotate it downward slightly. And once we've done that with all of them, as you can see here, we're going to end up with something that looks very much like a sunshade, but much bigger than ones that we have in game. Then we need to build a stand for it, so it's not just floating in the air. So we use just 3 pieces, I think, to do that. And later on, we'll do a sneaky little trick to make sure the rhinos sleep here. Then we're going to add in those bollards that I mentioned just to keep the rhinos inside the habitat. Now it's time for more decorating. We're going to do the thing that we always do with the mud baths and bury them in the terrain, paint some wet mud around it to make it look more natural, and drop in some more of those rocks and hawthorn bushes. I've got a little bit of exposed concrete there, like there used to be a pool there or something. I thought that might be a nice detail. And then we're going to create the Springbok creep. So what is a creep? In a mixed species habitat, a creep is where you create an area where only some animals will fit through it, so it becomes an area that they can go to and some of the other animals can't go to. Rhinos have a pretty fearsome reputation. They are regularly kept in mixed species habitats, but normally the zoo tries to ensure that the other occupants of the habitat have a place that they can go that the rhinos can't. in case the rhinos are ever in a bad mood, because you do not want to be around a rhino when it's in a bad mood. We'll drop in a shelter for the Springbok that's connected to the creep, and then it's onto the inside of the rhino house. So we're going to do a little bit of detailing in here, not too much. As always in franchise mode, I need pretty much all this space to keep the rhinos happy, and if I fill it with cages and interlocking doors, separation areas and things like that, they're not going to be able to walk anywhere. So we're just going to keep it really simple, build a little modular kind of cage system, and then place this in such a way that they can still get in and out of the shelter. Time to add the grass that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to put this mostly around the rocks, and then we're just going to have a little patch of it here that extends out into the habitat, make it look nicer. I figure maybe, you know, a little bit of grass is still alive. Drop some logs in. I always like some logs and branches lying around. Then we're going to do a little trick so that the rhinos actually sleep under the sunshade. So we use the path trick to enable us to put stuff down without changing the terrain, and then we'll drop some of the sleeping hay in. That will encourage them to sleep there. You'll see them doing that in the cinematics at the end. Let's move on to the final part of the build, the guest area. So this viewing gallery is exactly twice as large as the one in the hippos, which means that we can use the hippo gallery twice as the base for it. So we've got the bottom of it in there, and we're going to put some more of these rocks in to make sure that the rhinos never get too close to the guests. And then we'll build a roof. So we're going to use these thatch panels and try and get a really clean looking roof this time, rather than the really rustic looking roofs that we used in the forest. This is going to be quite a sort of centerpiece. You're going to be able to see this from up in the forest, going to be able to see this from everywhere really. So we need something a lot smoother than what we've had before. Once we've got these panels arranged, we're going to use the rotation trick to get things super smooth. Now the viewing gallery isn't a circle, it's like two semicircles with a path going through the center of it. So what we need to do is build a circle like this, and then cut it in half. So once we've got a circle that we're happy with, we're going to cut off the right hand side of it, and then we're going to take one section from the middle of it, this one, and copy that across so that it fills in the path, and then we'll move it one more time and do the rotation trick again to build the right hand side of it. Once we're done with it, we're going to end up with a roof which from the ground level looks really smooth. We've got some sort of artifacts on the top from where we spun it around, so we're going to cover that up with some of the grid roof pieces. Just play around with these until they look really natural sat on top of the circular parts, and finish the roof off really nicely. So we'll just move this one in as well, and then if we take a very quick look at it, it's looking pretty smooth from down on the floor. Lots more decorating to do, but before we get to that, it's time for Franchise Masters. What we're learning today is something I've just decided to call the two-color trick, which is a way to make your signs more interesting. So if we take this plain white rhino sign here, we're going to make it maybe a nice green to represent grass and the ground. And then once we've got a color we're happy with, what we're going to do is copy it, and then very, very slightly rotate the new copy forward like 1 degree. And then if we now select that and put that in a different color, we get a two-tone effect. We'll put maybe like a sky color in there so that we've got something that represents the ground and the sky. It's just so simple, but it lets you create things like this which can look really effective. Let's move on to the final detailing before we see the finished habitat. We'll drop a vista point in here to make sure that guests stand in the viewing gallery rather than on the path leading up to it. Put this huge white rhino statue up on the central column here, and then we're going to have a giraffe either side of it to tie it in with what's going to be coming next week. And speaking of next week, there is, as always, going to be a very special episode of San Bernardino Zoo coming very soon. You know the drill by now, so keep your eyes peeled on the channel over the next coming days, shall we say. Got some Eurasian animal action coming for you. We'll cover up the vista point with some of these African logs to make it look like it's covered in tree bark. I think that's a cool little touch, sits it in nicely with that fence behind it as well. And then finally, we'll use the upside down statue trick that we discovered a couple of weeks ago to get some rhino footprints taking guests from the path into the viewing gallery up to the vista point. And that is the habitat done. Let's take a look at it. Here's the creep for the Springbok with our first little Springbok in there. And then moving up into the main part of the habitat. I think those trees in the background work really nicely. Here's the shade structure. One of our rhinos has been having a little snooze there. We'll see him in it properly later on. And this is the view from the viewing gallery. I really like this. I think we've got enough colour in here to mitigate all the sand and dirt. I think it looks really attractive. And the white rhino in this game is amazing. Time for some action shots. Had a lot of fun filming these. We've just got the 2 rhinos and 3 springbok in here at the moment, and I actually feel like we've got a bit more room than this, so I am considering putting another animal in here, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide. We're going to speak more about that next week, but essentially you guys are going to choose one of the animals in our savannah. Here's a close-up of one of the rhino at their feeding station, and a better look at the viewing gallery. And now finally we'll take a look at them using the shade structure. So pleased I managed to get this in here and to get it working. I love the way you can persuade the animals to sleep where you want them to sleep with this hay. Let's take a look at where we started today. And this is where we are now. I think this is the biggest amount of terrain we've added in one single episode before. Next week we will be building the giraffe and zebra side of the savannah, but don't forget there'll be a special episode before then featuring a brand new animal. Here's a quick look at the members board. Thank you all so much for joining, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.